The alarms in the council chamber went off before anyone understood why. My hands were shaking before my mind caught up with my body. I am Velamara, a senior envoy of the Galactic Council, and in 300 years of service, I had never heard every alarm in the station scream at once. The floor trembled first. Then the lights dimmed, as if the station itself was holding its breath. I gripped the edge of my chair and looked around the chamber. Every delegate from every species was frozen in place. The Threshtach commander, a being made of hardened plating and sharp instincts, had already risen from his seat, claws extended, eyes locked on the main viewport. None of us could speak. None of us needed to. We all felt it. Something enormous had entered our system, and it was not asking for permission. The viewport turned dark, not with damage, but with shadow. A shape was blocking the light of our sun, and the shape kept growing larger as it moved closer. My translator implant buzzed with panic from a dozen different species at once, each one shouting in their own language, none of them making sense. Identify the vessel, the Threshtach commander barked at the sensor officer, a small nervous being named Erin, who worked at the control station near the front of the room. Erin's claws trembled over the console. Numbers scrolled across her screen faster than she could read them. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. 1 ship, she said, length, over 10 kilometers. Mass reading is higher than our entire defense fleet combined. The room went silent, not the calm kind of silent, the kind where every living thing stops breathing at the same time. I had seen large ships before. I had seen war fleets that could destroy a moon. I had seen ancient vessels built by species older than written history, but none of them had ever made this room feel this small. Where did it come from? I asked, though my voice barely came out as a whisper. Human space, Erin answered. It is a human ship. For a moment, nobody reacted. The idea felt impossible. Humans were a young species. Their homeworld was barely 2 centuries into contact with the wider galaxy. Their fleets were small, their technology considered simple compared to older empires like the Threshtach or the Ossuary Kingdom. We had summoned them to this very station only hours earlier to answer questions about their expansion into unclaimed territory. We expected a quiet meeting. We expected apologies. We did not expect the sky itself to bend around their arrival. The Ossuary High Priest, a tall being wrapped in ceremonial cloth, rose from his seat slowly. His voice, usually calm and controlled, shook slightly as he spoke. This cannot be their main fleet, he said. No young species builds something like this so early. Nobody answered him, because nobody knew the answer. Then the comms officer near the door raised his hand and said the human shuttle had docked. A single small craft, tiny compared to the massive shape outside, had detached from the giant vessel and connected quietly to our station. Minutes later, the chamber doors opened, and a woman walked in alone. She wore a plain gray uniform with no visible weapons and no guards beside her. Her expression was calm, almost bored, like she was walking into a routine meeting rather than a room full of frightened alien leaders. She introduced herself simply. "My name is Claire Whitfield," she said. "I represent the Human Diplomatic Office. I understand there is a question about our recent expansion." The Threshtach commander stepped forward immediately, his voice sharp with tension. "That ship," he said, pointing toward the viewport. "What is its purpose here?" Claire glanced behind her, almost surprised by the question, as if she had forgotten the ship was even there. "That is our escort vessel," she said simply. "We do not send diplomats into unfamiliar territory without protection. It is standard procedure." The room fell into stunned silence again. An escort, not a war fleet, not their strongest weapon, a single support ship, larger than anything most of us had ever built, called nothing more than a courtesy for one unarmed woman walking into a meeting. I studied her closely as she spoke. She did not boast. She did not threaten. She answered every question about human expansion with patience, providing records, survey reports, and documentation that most of the council had not even bothered to check before summoning her. When a small dispute came up regarding a mining claim near a contested system, she resolved it within minutes, offering fair compensation without hesitation. It would have been easy for her to use the moment to dominate the room. Many species before her had done exactly that, once they discovered the scale of their own power. The Threshtack had done it. The Ossuary Kingdom had done it as well, more than once. But Claire simply spoke like someone handling ordinary business, calm and steady, while outside the station, a ship larger than any capital city floated in silence. That silence, more than anything else, was what unsettled us. The ship made no threatening movements. It did not power any weapons that our sensors could detect. It simply stayed there, quiet and massive, like a mountain that had drifted into orbit by accident. And that was somehow more frightening than if it had opened fire. After the meeting ended, Claire thanked the council for their time and turned to leave. As she walked toward the door, one of the younger delegates, a nervous being from a smaller species called Doran, found the courage to ask a question that had been on everyone's mind. "Are there more ships like this one?" he asked. "Is this the strongest vessel your people have built?" Claire paused for a moment, thinking carefully before answering. "It is not the strongest," she said. "It is simply the one that was available today." She said it without pride, without any attempt to frighten us. She said it the way someone might describe grabbing whichever coat was closest to the door before stepping outside. And that honesty, more than any threat, sent a wave of fear through the chamber that no weapon could have caused. I walked with her briefly toward the docking bay, curious despite my fear. I asked her how her people managed to build something so massive so early in their history among the stars. She smiled slightly and said, "We learned quickly that surviving is not about being loud. It is about being ready." Her words stayed with me long after she left. As her shuttle detached from the station and returned to the enormous vessel waiting in orbit, I stood at the viewport and watched the shape slowly turn away, gliding into the darkness as quietly as it had arrived. I returned to my office that night and began writing my report for the council archives. I intended to include the trade details, the mining resolution, and the formal notes from the meeting. But before any of that, I added a single line at the top of the report, a line that later caused some disagreement among my superiors for being too informal for an official record. I left it there anyway. The line read, "We must never again assume the humans are young enough to underestimate." For 300 years, I had watched empires grow, fight, and sometimes fall. I had seen fear used as a weapon and power used as a warning, but I had never seen a species carry that much strength so quietly, as if it were simply part of daily life rather than something to display. That night, for the first time in my long service, I found myself unable to sleep, not because I was afraid of an attack, but because I finally understood something important. Power does not always arrive with noise or threats. Sometimes it arrives calmly, wrapped in patience, walking through a door with nothing more than paperwork and honest answers. And the humans, whether the rest of the galaxy realized it yet or not, had already learned that lesson long before we ever summoned them to explain themselves.